Today we are going to be talking about list rendering and how we can style our page or components in React. And I hope my screen is showing at that end. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. So, what is list rendering? As you can see, I put the definition here on the screen. So we use list rendering, or list rendering in general is the process of you rendering a collection of items on the screen. For example, you have a list of users that you are getting from the backend and you want to display it on the screen. And you know that this list of user is not something that is going to be like, it can be one, it can be two, three, four, it can be 100. So how are you going to render all this item on the screen easily without you calling each one of the data yourself there? When you are dealing with array in general in JavaScript, for example, here, let me open the DevTools, and under the console, imagine we have numbers like this. So nums, which is going to be 5, 8, 10, 25, and so forth like that. This is array of numbers. And anytime you call the name of the variable, it's going to give you all the value. Not that it will give you the first one, or the second one, or the third one. So if you need to get any one of the value, you know that you need to use the index starting from 0. So the first one is going to be as index 0. For us to get the second one, we are going to use index 1, and so forth like that. So which means if you have a list of data that you want to render on the screen, you have to start calling them one by one like this to put it on the screen. But that is bad, or that is not practical when you are dealing with a large data. Imagine you have 100 lists now of users. Are you not going to be calling them one by one like this? No. So we can use this render or list rendering to kind of talk to the React that, okay, React, we have this data that we want to display on the screen. Then from there, we use some of the functionality that is coming from JavaScript, which is this map. A map is a method or function that you can use on array to transform your data from one form into another form. For example, here now, the number that I have here. So this is the number. But what if I want to transform it to the square of each one of the number? We can do this thing easily by using map. So on every array, there is a map, and that map will receive a callback. So the callback is a function that you want to run anytime the JavaScript is calling this function there. And this your callback is going to receive three things, but major thing you need here is just the value. So it's going to give you the value. The next thing is going to give you is the index, and the other thing is going to give you the array, the actual array that you pass here. But to me, this one is useless because you have access to it already here. You can use it in the function that you are passing into this map. The major thing you use a lot are these two, the value and the index. And whatever you return from this function, that's what is going to use or is going to map into each one of the value here. Just like the mathematics that we did back then in 200 level that you talk about mapping. So you have a data and you have a function. So that function, whatever the method is giving to you, like 2x or x raised to power 2, what that thing is telling you that x is 5. So, and if you have 2x, it means the value that you are going to map into, it will be 2 times 5. So when the value is 8, it will be 8 times 2. When it is 10, that is 8 times 10, and so forth like that. And that's the same thing we are doing here too. So whatever you return from here, that's what this thing is going to use or is going to map into whatever value that you are getting from here. And it's going to do it for all the value that you have in your array. For example, here now, we can just do value times 2, just like what I mentioned now. Can you see? The data we have is this, but now we are mapping it to another set of data based on the function that we pass into the map here. And we can use this same knowledge that we have here to generate a component based on the list of data that we have in our application there. For example, I have all this list of data here where I have the user list, and at the same time down here I have the post list. But on the screen you can't just display object like this. So this data that we have now, we want to map it to a component that we actually want to show on the screen. But we don't want to be calling them one by one. You don't want to be doing index 0, index 1, index 2 and so forth like that. So we can use this map on that data and we now transform it to a component that we actually want to display on the screen. But how is this thing possible? That the array, because what is coming back is still array, but it's going to be array of component. But how is the React going to know how to render it on the screen? If you still remember, when we are talking about JSX, I told you that anytime you have array of data that React can show on the screen, what React will do is that it will join all these values together like a string, and it will just put everything to the UI there. So if I save this code now, by the time I get to the screen, as you can see, it combines everything together that you have inside the array. And we can do the same thing too. So instead of us just returning number like this, we can have array of components like this. So I have this user, so I'm going to call the component that I defined down here, and as you can see, what is going to return back is going to return this text. So, and I can, based on the data that we are getting from the backend or wherever you are getting the data from, we can map them into a component. So instead of the data now, what you'll be having on this line is going to be array of components that can be displayed to the user on the screen. And once React get to this line, it will combine everything together and it will put it on the screen in a more performance way like that. And if I save it now, you see that we are going to have that component now coming out. And with this experience, we can actually use it to map our data by using the map function that we have on the array there. And that's what aesthetically this thing is talking about. So the list rendering is all the process of you rendering a collection of items. So here we have the data, the collection or the data we have in this post list. So this post list now, we are going to transform it into a component that the React can now show on the screen to the user there. As you can see, I have array of components or array of any JSX element. You can put anything here. Whatever the React can render on the screen, you can put it inside your array. And once you get to the screen, you are going to see your normal data, not that you'll be seeing the array. Because React is smart, it will take everything you have inside this array and it will convert it to appropriate stuff that can be displayed on the screen based on whatever you put inside your array there. And how do you do this thing? So to do it in a normal sense, what we can do here directly from here, so we can take the data that we have inside this place. As you can see, the data for the user are this, where we have 10 users. So these are the list of 10 users, which is containing the name, the email, the score, and under the score, as you can see, we have this math, English, and so forth like that. So we can transform this data now to a proper stuff that can show on the screen, and that's where the list rendering comes in. So in order for you to render any collection of items on the screen, you can use map, because when you're talking about collection, it's array of data. You have to convert it to array. Even if it's not array, you have to make sure that the data is array. And as you can see from here, it's array because this is the array symbol here, and inside it we have all this data. So all this data now, we want to transform it to what the user can see on the screen. And inside this my div, since I want to use JavaScript code, you know that you need to open your curly brace so that React will know that whatever you have here is going to be interpreted as a JavaScript language. And as you can see, I've already imported the user. So it's inside another file, but we exported it out so that we can use it here. And where is it coming from? As you can see at the top here, I imported this post list and the user list. So this is array of all these user, and I want to use it on this line. So I know that it is array, just like what I mentioned here when we are dealing with this number. Let me go back again to this thing. So we have this nums, then we are using map. And this map, this is the actual data, but now we map it into value times 2. The same thing here, we have this our data, then we want to map it into something that we can show on the screen. And what do we want to show on the screen? What I actually want to show on the screen is going to be a table of the list there. So let me draft out the way it's going to look like. So we have this T head, which is the header part of the table, and inside this our T head, I'm going to be having this TR because I want to create a table. This is something we've talked about before. Then inside the TR, I will have the TH for the table heading. And what do we want to have there? We want to have name. The other thing we want to have is the email for each user. We are going to show their email. Then after that, we are going to show the scores, which is this math, science, and English. And after that, we calculate the stuff, the total score. So here, we are going to have the math head like this. So again, after the math, we are going to have the science, and lastly, we are going to have the English like this. So let me save this in. You're not going to see anything yet on the screen. Why? Because I've not really rendered the component, because I've removed this in here. So in order for us to see the component, we can actually call it here by rendering the components like this. So once I save this in and everything is on the screen, we should see our table coming out. As you can see, we have the table, but right now it's not having the line. So let me quickly pass the border so that we can see what is going on there. So we have the header part of the table, and the data that we want to use is coming from here, and it's not just one item. So we want to iterate this data and transform it to something that we can display based on this heading that we have here. So we have the math, the science, and the English. So for the username, okay, that one is username. Let me change it to username instead of name so that it can match. So we have this user name like this. So and the data that is coming from here, which is something I've already imported, we want to use it inside the T-body. So inside the T-body, we want to map all the data that is coming from that array into something that the user can see on the screen. So how do we do this? So in order for us to do this, inside this place, we need to transform that our data. So the user list that we have there, can you see? This is the data here. So we have the username, the email. But this data here now, you can't just show it to the screen. You can't just send it to the screen because React doesn't know how to render object. So we need to transform the data here into something we can see, which is this table. So the data that we have here, the first one now is going to have username as John Doe. Email will be this. For the math, it's going to show 85. For the English, it's going to show 78. And for the science, it's going to show 90. So we need to transform this data to what the user can see. And to do that, we are going to use our map function, because we know the data we are getting back, which is this users, is array. And on the array there, you always have access to the map function. And don't forget, when you're using map, you need to give it a function, or what we call callback. Callback is a function that you are passing as parameter to another function. So whatever function that you pass to another function as parameter, they are referred to as callback. So this callback here now, whatever you return from it, that's what we have to see, and that's what is going to put on the screen. And don't forget, this your function that you are passing. We have access to the value, it will have access to the index, and it will have access to the entire array that you are using, which is the same thing as this user list. But I don't need it. The only two things that I need here are this. And again, I will not call this one value. I will just call it user, because these are parameter. You can call them anything you want. And calling it user is making sense here because we have user list, and we know that for each one of them is going to be giving us each user. And what do we want to do here now? So what you need to do is to return whatever you want to show on the screen. So whatever you return from here, that's what you want to show on the screen. For example, here I can just return this is going to be tr like that. So we are going to have our tr here. So tr, then inside the tr, what are we going to have there? We're now going to display the data for the cell. So inside the cell, for the first one, we have the name there like that. So let me put it steady, which is going to be user, then dot username. But if you look at what I'm typing now, you know it is wrong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. But if you type it like this, it will not show what you're expecting it to show, because anytime you want to interpret JavaScript code inside JSX, you know that you must always put it in the curly brace. But right now, I did not put anything there, just for you to see what is going on. So for the second one, what are we showing there? We are showing the email. But where am I getting all this thing from? We know that for every user, there is always going to be username, there will be email, and for the underscore, that's where we're going to pick all this math and so forth like that. So for the other one, I don't even need to waste time. So here, let me just put it inside the curly brace so that you can interpret it for us as a valid JavaScript code. Again, the other thing we want to display is going to be, so TD like this. What do you want to show again? The user, then the scores, and the math. That's where we're going to get the other one. So for the one that follows this, the science, so this one too is going to be science. And lastly, we have the English based on the data that we have there. So we have the English like this. So what are we doing here? This is what is known as list rendering here. So what we are doing here is that we are mapping through this data and we are transforming it to another set of value, just like the way we have it here. We have this value 5, 8, 10, and 25. But we want to create another type of value based on what we have here. So we are now mapping through everything. So JavaScript will run on top of this array and it will be giving you each one of the value at a time. So this value, for the first time, it will be representing 5. Once we're done with that one, then the next time the value will be 8. Once we're done with this one, then the next value will be 10. Then the next value will be 25 until it gets to the end of the array. And it's going to return back a new set of array based on whatever you are returning from your map function. And that's the same thing we are doing here. We have the list of user. So we are receiving the value, and based on that value here, we are mapping the data to this. So we are returning this tr, and inside the tr, we create the cell for each one of them. Because for each data, we want to create row. So when you are dealing with the first user, it will generate its own row. Then when it's done with that user, which is this particular one at the top, so the user is John Doe. Once we're done with this one, then it will generate another row again for this. It will generate another one for this, and so forth like that. And once everything is okay, you'll see that we are going to have the list of the user on the screen. This is just sample. You can map your data anyhow you want. If it is just only the username and email you want to use, you can just map only that data. But based on what I have right now, as you can see, we have all the data being displayed on the screen. And I don't need to start calling each one of them one by one. What did I do here? I transformed the data, the raw data that I have, into something that I can show on the screen based on my UI. So the UI here is a table which have the username, the email, then the score for these three courses there, like that. And we have the data already, which is coming from the backend. You can think of it as it's coming from the backend. And the data that is here is not in the form the way we want to display on the screen. So what can you do? You can use the list rendering to transform the data from the raw one into a meaningful data that you want to show on the screen. Yes? What do you say? Hello? I can't hear you.
Anymore.
What do you say?
Can you hear me now? I can't see your screen anymore.
My screen is showing here. Let me stop and share.
Yeah.
Can you see now, or it's still the same thing?
Yeah, I can see it now. I can see it now.
I guess it's slow that it's trying to do nonsense. Alright, so if you look at it here, the data inside the TH, they are static data. Is something that is not changing. That's why I'm typing it myself. But down here, the data is not static. It's dynamic, and again too, is depending on the data that is coming from this backend. Let's just assume that this data is coming from the backend, or we are getting it from the external source. But this data now is an array of data. And based on the knowledge of map that we have on array, which is one of the methods you can use on array. There's a lot of method you can use on array there, but map is really useful because that's what you are going to be using when you are dealing with list rendering in React. So you have a list of data that you want to show on the screen, but that data might not come in the way that you are going to put it on the screen. So what do? You transform it to what you want to show to the user on the screen. If I want, I can just remove all these scores and just display only the username and the email, or display only the score and so forth like that. You are in charge. Whatever you return from the map, that's what the new array is going to be represented here. And that array now, React will seize it, and once it sees it, it will display everything on the screen automatically. So what we are actually doing here is that we are creating another set of array based on the data we are getting from here. And whatever you return from your map, that's what is going to use as the new value. Just like the way we have this num that have 5, 8, 10, 25. But now we map to it, and what are we doing here? We are multiplying the value by 2. So it's going to give us a new set of array that we can use. If I call this num again, I can use num, then map, but instead of me just using the value times 2, what I can just do here is to do by just using max, then dot power, which I want to take the value. So it's going to be value raised to power 2 like this. As you can see, it's going to map it to a new set of data, which is x raised to power 2. So you can think of this one as x raised to power 2, just like the mapping that you do in 200 level back then, where you have a set of value here, then you want to map it to another set of value, but based on a function that you pass, or the function that you have inside that oval shape there. So if it is 2x, you know how you are going to do the mapping from the left to the right. And that's the same thing, or the same concept that we are using here. We have the list of users, and we are now mapping it to a row. And inside the row, we have all this data that we are showing, because we know that our data, for each one of them, there is username, email, and under the scores, we have these 3 items. And that's what we did here. So we display the username, the email, then we pick the score for the maths, the science, and the English. And as you can see now, we have the list of items on the screen. And later on, even if the list is more than this, you don't need to do anything. Since you've already created the code that is going to generate this in, everything will be fine, because it's still the same pattern. The difference is just the data that you have inside your list there. So list rendering allows you to render a list of, or a collection of items as a list of UI components on the screen there, like that. So this will make it easier for us to convert array of data or collection of data into a UI element that you can now show on the screen, because this thing is very important. Most of all the data you see on the screen, or this thing there, they are based on a list of data that is coming from a particular source, and you want to show them correctly on the screen without you going over each one of them one by one. If you want to do this thing now, it's something that you have to type like 10 lines for each one of these items. Instead of using user directly, you'll be using user list as index 0. You do for another one index 1 and so forth like that. But it's not practical, because if the list is more than thousands of if the list is like thousands of lists, are you not going to be doing it yourself? No. So React can handle this thing for us. Our own is just to map the data into the UI you want to show on the screen, and the React we handle the remaining stuff for you there like that. So the same thing that we are doing here, you can actually do it again too for the list of the posts. So we have this other data down here too, where we have the list of posts, we have the ID, we have the title, we have the body, and we have the author for the post. Here too, we can actually map this data now to a UI that we can showcase on the screen to the user there. So this same UI, or this same data here now, we can map it to a set of data that we can showcase to the user on the screen. So I'm waiting for my pen to show up here. So it's now show up. So for example now, for each one of the list of the item or this post, we want to create a box like this, which is going to be a div. Inside that div, we are going to have the title at the top like this. Then after the title, we are going to have the body following it. Then after the body, or even before the title, we want to show the author. So let me do it again. So we want to have a list of items in this way. So each one of the component or each one of the items is going to be like this. So we are going to have the author name at the top like this. Then after the author name, we are going to have the title. Then after the title, we're now going to have the body. And this is the UI that we want to map each one of these data at there. And as you can see, I'm not focusing on the ID for now because I'm not using it. I don't want to show it on the screen, or even if I want to show the number by the corner here, I can use the ID to showcase that. But we are not dealing with CSS right now, so we'll soon get to that one. So that's why I don't want to go into the styling part for now. So let's work on this one too. So instead of us working on this users, so I'm going to comment it out and again render our post component, which is what I have down there. And from this one too, we are going to map through the data and we return the UI based on what I draw out here like this. So let me collapse this one and save. We shouldn't have this in again on the screen. Yes, so we don't have it again. Under this post, what do we say we want to do? We want to map through our data. So we want to map through our data, the same thing, the same concept there. So post, then list here, map. So we are going to get the data. So I'm going to call the data post and we can have the index. If you notice, I've not been using the index. I will get back into it because it's very important for now. But so inside this place, we need to return the UI that we want to display. And as you can see, the sample of the UI here, we have a div which is wrapping the author name, the title, and the body of the post. So here I'm going to create a div. So inside this div, we are going to have the author at the top. So let me generate the div. VS Code, why are you doing me like this? So I'm going to be generating this div. Inside the div, I will be using span. So what is this span there for? Or I will be using the p tag rather like this. And inside my p tag, what do I want to do there? I want to display the author name. So first I will just do author like this so that people can know what that name is there for. So at the front, we're going to have the post author like this. So you have to use the correct name, which is matching whatever the key that you have in the object. So we are displaying the author here, but it would be nice if the stuff is bold. So I'm going to use b tag just to make sure that the author name is bold. Then after the author, what do we say we want to display? We want to display the title. So for this title, I will be using h3 because that's the heading or the major thing. So we want to have post.title. Then after the title, what else do we have? We now have the body for the post. So this one now is going to be the p. So we have the post, then dot body like this. Then after that, closing my p tag. So what are we doing? We have a list of posts, and that list of posts, we are mapping it into the component or into this set of UI that we want to display on the screen. So for each one of the posts, we want to create this div. Then inside the div, we have this p which shows the author, we have the title, and we have the actual post body that we want to display. And all this thing is coming from the data. So for each one of them, it's going to generate this item for us like that. Or here too, I can actually have the span so that we'll put the ID there too, like that. So I have the span. VS Code was all this one. VS Code is not general, but to closing this thing for me. So at the top, we want to have the post.id like this, which is going to act like the number. So beside it, I'm going to put the hash there so that it will be like a ID or the invoice this in there like that. So once this thing is saved and it gets to the screen, as you can see here, we are going to have this data displaying on the screen to the user. Starting from the first one, as you can see, this is the first post that we have here. Again, this is the second one. We have the ID, the author, the title, and at the same time we have this particular part, which is the body of the post. This is the third one until it gets to the last one. So this is what we call list rendering here. So the list rendering is the process of you rendering a collection of items as a list of UI that you want to showcase to the user there, or whatever you want to display to the user on the screen. You're always going to have a list of data, but that list of data, you transform it or you map it to a set of UI elements or components that you actually want to showcase on the screen, and it's going to create that same UI for different data that you have there. But you can actually display different UI if you want. That means you have to be applying some condition here, which is something we are going to do when we are working on our first application, which is going to be next class there. So this is how you can render a list in React. You have a set of data, a collection of data that you want to show on the screen, but that collection of data is not in the form that you want it. You can always transform the data into the set of UI that you want to showcase on the screen. But when you are dealing with list rendering, if you look at our console here, there is a warning that we are getting from React, because every time you are generating a list, React will see that okay, this one, even though you are using the same component, React should be able to differentiate this first one that you are generating here from the second one that you are generating here. Even though it's the same component, React needs to be able to differentiate them in case maybe you are removing something from that data or you are adding to that data. So how React is going to know to remove this thing on the screen, or how it's going to make this thing to be faster when you are dealing with a large list of data. We are dealing with this small data like this, you will not even see any problem with it, but it's always good that you use a prop which is known as key. So this key is what you can use to differentiate each one of these UI elements that you are returning back to, or that you are displaying on the screen. Because if you can see, it's the same thing that is just going to reuse again and again for each one of the posts that you have there. The difference between them is just the data that you have in between them. The user cares about the data, but not too concerned about React about the data. It needs to differentiate each one of the UI elements that you are showcasing on the screen. And how the React going to differentiate this one that we generated for the first post and the second one? So we need to give the first element that you are returning a key, and this key should be something that is unique, because that's the major thing about the key. This is what is going to know, okay, this is student one for like school. Now you know every student have matric, and based on that matric you can differentiate between one student to the other one. The same thing here too. React want to be able to differentiate between this div of the first post from the second post. So how is it going to differentiate them? It's always good that you supply this key to the first element you are returning. So whatever the first element you are returning, this key should always be there, and whatever you use for the key should be unique. Most of the time you see people using index, but this is bad practice, because index can change, and React actually give us that, or React is telling us to use something that is unique from the set of data that you are working with. And if you look at it, something that is always unique here is the ID. So we can use it, but most of the time you always see me using index because we are just learning. But when you are working in real sense, you should not use index. Always avoid index, because it's something that can change. You know, your list of data can be 10 the first time, then when you now remove one item, it will go down to 9. So which means index can change, but ID is always the same. ID will always be the same. Even though right now the ID is number, but the ID cannot change, because we know that it's something that you are using to identify a particular data. You don't want to be changing that ID for or changing the ID of a particular post every time. No, once you create a post, the ID you have there is what is always going to be there throughout. So we can use the ID in place of index, but you can see me using index later on. But right now what I'm going to do is to use the ID that is coming from post as a key. So based on this thing now, that we know that okay, this first post, this is your own. Then the second one, based on the key, it recognize that second item that is going to be on the screen, and so forth like that. And when any one of them removed on the screen, it knows how to remove the stuff behind the scene that will make this scene faster compared to React destroying everything and then create it again, because that's what is going to happen when you don't put the key. Anytime something happen with the list, it's going to destroy everything and recreate it again. Now imagine you have millions of lists. You want React to recreate everything. It can slow down the system of the user depending on the power of the user system there. But you don't want this thing to happen, because anybody that want to visit your site, you want it to be fast. Like the site should be fast. Like you don't want them to see any form of a delay in whatever they are doing, or they want to list or they want to click on the option to update a particular list, and after clicking on it, the thing now waits for like 2 seconds or so before it can update the list. You don't want anything like that, and that's why it's always good when you are dealing with list rendering. The first element you are returning should always have key, and the key should always be unique. If the key is not unique, React will warn you again that the key is not the same thing. But now let me clear everything, reload. We shouldn't have any error again in our console. As you can see, React is happy. But if this key is not part of the stuff there, so let me save and reload the page again, React is not going to be happy with us. It's going to be giving us this warning that it's seeing all of them that they are not having key, or the key is the same. So as you can see, it's complaining that each child in a list should have a unique key props. So it's very important that you use it. Right now, you will not see any implication, but it's always good that you put it. Even when your list is not big and it's not going to cause any problem, you should always put the key there. So now, no error coming out on the screen here. So this is all about list rendering. And now I'll be moving into styling in React, because this one is very important too. We should be able to style our element. Look at the way this thing looks like. It's not nice at all. I want them to be placed side by side, and I want it to have a box. I want it to have box shadow and so forth like that. So how can we style our components in React? How can we style our components? If I get there, let me give this one to key, because it's very important. So we're going to have the key, and what's the value? It's going to be user.username, because I know username is always unique. Yeah. So there's no way you have a system that you're going to have two users with the same username. It's not possible. So since it's always unique, I'm using it as the key, so that it doesn't complain if I'm talking about the user later on there like that. So now we have our list. So how can we style in React? So we have different way of applying styling in React. So I've created a component for this too. So as you can see, this list rendering, I've actually created a component in this folder here. So I have a folder for components, and inside that folder, I have these two components there. So the list rendering.gsx and the styling in React.jxx. And I'm importing them from up here. As you can see them, they are coming from this folder, and then I'm rendering them inside the app. Don't forget, whatever you want to show on the screen must be inside the app. So now, saving the code, we should have our styling in React coming up on the screen. So these are different methods, or these are different ways of styling your components or your elements inside React application. So you can do inline styling, you can do external styling, which means you are creating a separate CSS file, or you can do what we refer to as CSS modules. I'm going to show you what is that. Again, you can use some of these CSS framework like Tailwind or Bootstrap. We are going to be using them later on. I won't talk about them in this class, but they are there, and we're going to be using it later on. Most especially this Tailwind, because we don't want to be typing most of all this CSS by ourselves. So we are going to be using this CSS framework to style our component. But right now, I'm going to talk about what is inline CSS, what is external styling, and the CSS module. And again too, we have UI library. These are a predefined component or a predefined UI element that have been built down for you. And we have a lot of them, like this MUI, we have Ant Design, we have Prime UI, Semantic UI, and a lot of them that you can use in your project to fast track your application. Because when you are working on a large project, you might need to employ UI library to speed up your development, so that you don't want to start creating everything from the scratch yourself. You can use some of this UI library that have really designed a lot of this thing down for you. For example, here now, the MUI that I mentioned, they have bunch of components that you can use. So this is MUI, can you see the React component library? So this one now, it comes with bunch of UI elements that you can use, like the input, your form, and a lot of them like that. The drop down ranges for different components that you can use. Can you see? They have date picker, they have this. You can see you building this thing yourself is going to take you a lot of time to build it. But instead of you doing this thing yourself, you can use a UI library that already have all these things designed down for you. Your own is now to style it to look like your application. And you can see different people or different companies that have used this UI library before, and you can go into their doc and see how this thing works. But all of them follow the same pattern. Can you see the component? They have a lot of components. So if you need the input, the buttons, you don't need to start creating all of them from scratch. You can use this UI library. As you can see, they have different form of button. Is it the one with the line? Is it the one that have color inside it? And you can style them. You can change the styling from what it is right now easily. And I've used a lot of them on the projects that I've worked on. Almost all of them look the same. The difference is just the pattern or the styling or the way they arrange their components that is different. So we have this Ant Design too. So if I go to that one, you'll see that it follows the same pattern. The difference is just the way each one of them build their component, or what are the stuff you can do with their component. That's just the difference between all of them. They're like that. And you always stick with one. Not that you be picking from one to the other one. No, you stick with one. And I've used this Ant Design too before. I've used this MUI and a lot of other one like the Prime there. So we can go into the component, and it's going to show the list of all the components that you have access to that you can use. As you can see, they have button too. They have floating button that you normally see on your phone. On if you are using Android, there's a floating button there. So if you want to use that on your application, you can actually use this library to quickly build a site that have something like that without you building the stuff from scratch. If you want, you can do it yourself from scratch, but when you are working on a bigger project, you always want to go with a UI library. So as you can see here, so all this kind of a question, whatever stuff, so clicking on it, depending on whether that thing have the stuff, as you can see, yeah, but I think it's still loading, because normally, yeah, so this is what I was expecting. You can see once you move on top of it, it will pop out some of these items, or you can close or open the stuff. As you can see, different mode that you can have it. You can have it like this. You can be the one that have message down here, and the site too is even using it. Because if you look at it here, if I click on this thing, they are using it down here. So if you need something like this, you can create it yourself. But you creating yourself or wasting time to create it, you can use a library or UI library, as we used to call them, to design your site by picking their elements. So they have the drop down, they have the menu, they have the pagination. You don't need to start creating all these things yourself. Your only just to install the library, and you start importing them anytime you need it. So for the drop down, you are going to have different drop down. When you click on the button, as you can see, clicking on the button, it will give you different method. Is it the one that comes from the top, or is the one that comes from the bottom, or is the one that comes from the right, and so forth like that. So you can see it have different design. So you creating this thing yourself will take you a lot of time, but you can use UI library. But we are not going to be using UI library for now. We want to see how we can actually use the CSS by ourselves. So we are going to be talking about inline or this external and this CSS modules later on. But I will only focus on these two in this class. And later on, when we want to work on our project in the next class, we are going to be using this CSS module. So I will explain it in that class, and we're going to use it for the project. But after that moment, I won't be using them again. When we are dealing with a bigger project, I will either go for Tailwind or go with the UI library. But for now, I'll be explaining what is inline, how you can deal with inline, because it's different from the way you do it with normal HTML. We're going to be talking about the external one, which is normal CSS that you created in another file, and you are now linking it to your component. So to deal with the inline CSS, let me go back into that our list rendering again. Imagine this our post that we are displaying right now. So this div, I want to give it a background. So how do I give it a background? I can use this inline CSS or I can use the external one. But right now, I'm going to use inline CSS. So to use inline CSS, you're just going to call the style, this style attribute. But it's quite different from the way it is in normal HTML. In normal HTML, you mention the style, and in the quotes, you start passing whatever CSS property you want to do. But don't forget, I told you this one is not just normal HTML code. This is JSX code. So whatever you are doing here is not normal HTML. So some of them, the way you use them in normal HTML is quite different here. So when you want to deal with style, you can't do it like this. So when you're dealing with style, you have to use objects. So and in order for you to use objects, you need to use your JSX code here. So in order for us to talk to React that this thing is going to be object, we need to use our expression first, and inside the expression you can now have the object, and inside this object, that's where you specify all the properties that you want to apply on this element. So the first thing you have to do is to put your object inside expression. If you don't put it there, React will be doing something else. So you need to firstly open the curly brace. Inside the curly brace, you have the nested one, and inside this nested one, that's where you are going to apply all the styles that you want on the element. And this one follows JavaScript code. You can't be dealing with normal this in here. So if you want to apply background here now, we need to use background. So for example, background color, can you see it's even coming out already? You are going to have autocomplete because this is JSX and React is connected, so it will give you the autocomplete because React knows about what you have to pass to this style. Since it knows about it, it's going to give you autocomplete, as you can see, background color, and here we can give it red. So for each one of the lists that we have on the screen, as you can see, it's going to give each one of them, because they are jam packed together. That's why it's looking like that. But I can create a parent for them here. So let me create a parent here. So I'm going to create another div so that we can space them from each other. So here too, we want to use our inline CSS. So we are going to use style. Then inside it, I'm going to pass display because I want to use flex. So display is going to be flex. Then after that, we want to use flex direction. But don't forget, in your normal CSS, you use hyphen. But here we don't use hyphen. You capitalize the word that follows each other there. So flex direction is going to be column. And again, the gap is going to be 2 rem like this. So what I'm doing on this line is what we call inline CSS. So what we have on this line, something is missing here. This is not display. It should be display. So what we have on this line is known as inline CSS. So when you want to apply inline CSS, you call the style and you open the expression. Inside the expression, you pass the object of all the style that you want to apply on that element, and it's going to show everything for you on the screen, or it's going to apply the style on the element. And once this thing gets to the browser, we should have all this thing spaced from each other. But why am I not having the space from each other? So let me check what is going on the page. So let me inspect, not this. So I want to inspect. So as you can see, each one of them are here. So this is one, and we have this background. Then I have this display of oh, now let me check. Oh, this is the problem. Yeah, it will never work. And the reason it's not working is because of the extra div that we have here. But the styling that I'm putting here, let me move it down. It's actually supposed to be here. So let me move all of them down here because of the way the thing is being rendered. So let me move everything down here. It's supposed to be part of this item. So it's supposed to be here. Why the background that is here is not supposed to be here. So let me put it on this div that we are putting out there like that. So again, the style, then open it up, pass the properties you want to show or the styling that you want to pass on the element. So save it, and as you can see now, this is what I'm expecting here like that. So now we have this gap in between them, but I don't want it to be like this. I want them to be side by side. So instead of me using column here, I'm going to remove it. What I will just do is flex wrap. So it's going to be flex wrap, which is going to be wrap. These are just normal CSS value, but this is bad because I don't like to be doing all this one. Is when you want to use dynamic value, that's when you'll be using inline. Most of the time, you always want to use external CSS so that you can reuse it in different places. So I'm going to save it, and now it should place them side by side. But again, it's not side by side because the content that we have there is really much. So what we can do here is to actually, we can use grid, then specify the amount of items we want per line, or limit the width of the box. So here what I can just do is to use max width. So whatever the box that I want to have, the maximum width should just be maybe 180 pixels like this. And each one of the box are not going to go past that 180. And as you can see here, it will make sure that they are now placed side by side. The reason it's not there before, the content are really large. This text here is large, so it's taking a lot of space like that. So now that we make it a maximum of 180, so there will be enough room and the other content can go side by side, or I can even increase it so that we have like 33 on one line like this. And I can even use grid to make it look nicer like that. So instead of us using max width directly from here, what we can just do is to display grid, and we mention the number of item per line. So we're going to do grid templates columns like this, come outside. So this is going to be repeat. So repeat is going to be what? It's going to be 3 1FR like this. So let me close the comma like that and save. Then now it will take up the entire space instead of leaving this extra space that is not up to 280 that we have currently. It's going to make sure that the 3 boxes are shared between the spacing that we have here. But why am I not seeing it? Yeah, this thing is not loading here. What's going on? Is this thing not saved? Yes, what's all this? Yeah, as you can see now, it's covering the entire box. So you can use inline to apply CSS, or you can use this external CSS. So what is external one? What you'll be doing here is to create a CSS file. As you can see here, we have this app.css, and it's now being used inside the app.jss. So inside this component, I'm going to create this external stuff, but by convention, you always see by people using the same name of the component as the name of the style, if each one of them are creating their own separate style. But I want to use the same style for all of them, so I will just say style.css like this. So this is the external CSS. And what did I want to do here? I just want to select my element or create a class for easy selection there. So what did I want to do? So let me go to this list rendering, and I'm going to give all these elements some classes so that we can target them. So for this one, it's going to have class. But when you are using class in your element, we don't just type class like this, because class is special in JavaScript, because this thing is being used to create a component when you are dealing with class component. So you can't just use class, so you have to use class name. I've explained this thing before. Then inside the class name, this one should be post ID. So this is the class that I want to give that one. So for this one, we're going to put another class name, and for this is going to be post author like that. So for this one, I'm going to give it a class, even though I'm saying class, but what we used to type is class name. So this one is going to be post then title like that. And for this one, I'm going to give it another class. So class name, this one is going to be post body. So now I have all these classes. So what I can do now is to go into this external file and style all this stuff here based on the class that I put here. So let me put this in side by side again so that we can see what is going on on the page. So we have all these classes on this element. What we just need to do now is to start selecting them from here. So we have the post ID. So what did I want to do? I want the color of that one to be yellow. I want the text decoration, so I want it to be underlined. Or if I don't want it to be underlined, what I can just do here is, yeah, I think the color is okay for that text. So what do we have again? We have the post author. So for the post author, I want it to have background like this. So background like this. I want it to be yellow, and the color should be red, like that. So it's going to have padding of 0.25 rem. That's 4 pixels. So apart from the post author, we have the post title. So for the post title, that one is going to have font size of 3 rem. So it's going to make the title to be bigger like that. So what do we have again? We have the post body. And for the body, what do we want to do there? We want the font, by default is 16. So I want to reduce it to 14 pixels. And 14 pixels is 0.875 rem like this. So this one is 48 pixels, this is 4 pixels, and this is 14 pixels. As you can see, this is 48 like that, this is 4, and this is 14. How do I know about them? I've been working with all these common values, so I know their rem value, and I have the extension that can even show it there like that. But now let me save. This thing will not work. Let me save, and after saving, as you can see, nothing is changing on the page. Why is it not changing? Even though, let me save this one too. So let me save this one too. Nothing is changing. Our style is still using the inline. Why is it not changing all this thing? The reason why it's not changing is because the two file doesn't know about each other. Any style, any external style that you want to use, you have to connect it to the component file where you want it to be used. So if you want to use all the style inside this component, you have to import it at the top here. So whatever style that you want to use in your component, you have to use it, or you have to import it here. So what do we want to import? We want to import this, our style.css. So we have a style.css which is inside the same folder, and I'm importing it here. And once this thing is saved and everything is okay, can you see what is that going on? Everything is now styled based on what we have inside this place. And I can change this thing for you to see that it's working. So here I can actually use green as a color, and now our title should change, or this our ID should change to the green. But I love this yellow because it come out more. And again too, this body that is here, I want to have a style for it. So what can we do? We can go down again to this our post, and that parent, instead of me using this style, I can connect to external too, and it's going to apply the two of them. But don't forget, inline will win over the external if you apply something that is there. So I will just say post container like this. So I'm calling it post container. Then inside our CSS here, what did I want to do with the post container like this? First of all, I want to apply padding because everything is just jam packed together. So I want to apply padding of 1 rem, which is 16 pixels. So now everything shouldn't be at the edge again. It should be the other side here once the thing is done loading like that. But I can't see it. Why can't I see it? Because I put this in at the wrong side here. So let me cut it out from here because it's applying on the entire parent. That's not what I want. I want it to apply on each one of the boxes there. So let me apply it here, and it should put it here. So it should put it on each one of the boxes. What it's doing here before is putting it on the container. There is a container that we apply this in on, which I can give background maybe to be orange like this. But don't forget, we are inside GSS file, so we need to put it in a quote because you are dealing with JavaScript. And again, this one can't be semicolon. It has to be comma, or you leave it empty if it's the last item. And as you can see now, can you see that they are inside that container? And if I want, I can give it padding too, like around this 1 rem, so that we see that we have that container there. So we have a container that we are displaying as grid, and inside it we are now listing out all these items, and from there we are applying the styling into each one of these items by either using this inline or this external CSS there. And in the next class, I'll be talking about this CSS module, and at the same time, we'll be working on a particular application there. Let me see the application we're going to be working on. It's just a simple application that we're going to use to put everything that we've learned together. Whatever that is going to be inside the application will not be something that we've not talked about right from the class 1 up to this time here. So what we are going to be working on in the next class is going to be this it should be interactive rating. Yeah. So this is it. This is the application we are going to be working on in the next class. So this is the application we are going to be working on in the next class. So this application put everything that we've talked about together. So it talked about JSX, well, it talks about components, it talks about events in React, it talks about conditional rendering, and at the same time it talks about list rendering. So we are going to be using all these features in the next class. So we have this components, or we are going to have two components, or even have multiple components, because I'm going to this circle too, I'm going to create it as a component, but we are now going to reuse it by passing the data into it. So this is our application. This is how it's going to look like. Once you go to the page, this is how it's going to look like. And once you click on any of these items and you click on submit, it's going to take us, or it's going to show another component again, and the component is going to show is this one, and the number here, as you can see, it will be based on what you pick from that first component for that first page. Whatever you pick there, it's going to say you selected 4 out of 5, thank you, and all these other text will be displayed. So this thing now, we are going to have this component that wraps everything here, and inside it we have all the text, and again we are going to create another one, because if you look at this card, you see that it's the same thing for this one and the same thing that is being used here. So the card that we have here, it would be nice if you just create one copy and we now reuse it for this part and this second part here. This entire card is the same, but the contents are different. So we are going to create all these things as components. We bring them together, and it's going to be full application. After that, the following classes will go further by talking about routing. So in the next classes after this one that we are going to be going to, that's going to be March. Should be March. So it's going to be about routing. And what I mean by that, when you get to site, you know that you can move from one page to another. But the React is known as the SPA application, which means single page application. If you look at the file that we have right now, you are going to see that the only thing we just have there is this single HTML. And you know that before you can have different pages, you need to have different HTML file. But how do we mimic different pages? So how do we display component as a page? So we are going to see how to do all those things once we are talking about routing. Routing is just you clicking on a link and it's taking you to another page or another place in your application. But it's not going to be a page. What will be there is component. What you are actually changing is component. So when you are on the /jobs, it will show a component for that. When you're on the home page, it will show a particular component. When you go to sign up, it will show another component, and so forth like that. So we're going to see how we can do it and what we need to do or what we need to install and so forth like that. But in the next class, we are going to be working on this application here, and after that we deploy it, and you too, you are going to do your own there. So that is going to be all for today. Any question for